All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the official report launch webinar for the new report published today by the Global Solar Council called Scaling Up Distributed Solar Generation. It's an exciting new report that looks into how we can tap in to the potential for distributed solar to drive the energy transition and sustainable development. We have an exciting program for you today. If you want to go to the program slide. Awesome, thank you so much. So we'll start off with opening remarks, and then we'll go into a presentation that covers the top takeaways from the report itself. And then we'll dive into a panel discussion with some experts from across the world, from the sector and NGO climate space. So we'll have a very exciting discussion there. At any point, if you do have a question for our speakers or panelists, we will be accepting questions from the audience, and you can use your Zoom toolbar. There should be a Q&A button at the bottom, and you can submit your questions there. And at the end of the panel discussion, we'll be putting them towards the panelists. On that note, let's kick it off and get started. So I'm going to hand it over to Gianni Chianetta, who is CEO at the Global Solar Council. Over to you, Gianni.
Thank you very much, Elisa. Thank you very much for introducing me at the webinar. Welcome to everybody, the speakers and the audience here to this very important webinar of Global Solar Council. I'd like to highlight setting the scene of this webinar. Everybody knows that the world needs urgent action in order to accelerate the energy transition, to stay on the 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway before to have really the consequences, really irreversible, the consequences of climate change. We already see the effect of climate change. Together with all the leading organizations of the Global Renewable Alliance, we joined together actually last year at COP27 to be stronger. We called for tripling the total global renewable capacity by 2030. But how to achieve this goal? Anyway, we need to really utilize all the possible tools we have in our hands in order to reach this goal. And indeed, one of these tool is distributed PV. We have already, as solar globally, as solar PV reached and passed the 1 terawatt of installed capacity, but unfortunately the distributed PV is only one small portion of this part. There is a lot to unlock, also because distributed solar PV is really one of the most democratic, versatile, modular, accessible source of energy for individuals, for business, for companies, any kind of companies, aggregate communities together, and now people can really participate to this energy transition. So in Global Solar Council, let me say, for the maybe in such a way, for the first time ever, as an industry association, we are talking to people, to all the people, to take action, to become from consumer, prosumer, protagonists of this energy transition. And so we, for this reason, we started this initiative, which is called Empower People with Solar PV, which aims at really give all the needed information for people to also understand how they can be a prosumer, how can be protagonist, how can they push for right policy. We did a campaign already from last year, explain the people the benefits for their pocket, for the economy, for the planet, for the grid of solar PV, and so on. We of course, our goal is also to have the people to push for policymakers to allow them, all of us, to be protagonists. But of course, we cannot, on the other side, our initiative involves also a report that we are presenting today for the first time, which is a report try to deepen one of the main bottlenecks to unlock the huge potential that we'll see in a moment of distributed PV. The authorization process involves authorization for the connection to the grid and the authorization for the building of the solar PV. And the bureaucracy behind this authorization, the time and the papers, the entities involved, is not sustainable and anymore, and is a cost in when we think to the total cost of the installation of a solar PV plant. We cannot wait anymore. We have, as you say, the landscape is changed dramatically with the Ukraine crisis, with the oil and gas price fluctuation, and so we need indeed to take action. I'd like to thank all the contributors to this report because we of course have collected a lot of information from many countries, and I'd like to inform that this is just a first step, because as Global Solar Council will continue to the campaign, and also there will be an upgrade of the report that we will present at least in a draft version at the COP28. And so please follow us. I'd like to profit in conclusion to inform that GSE, as part of the Global Renewable Alliance altogether, we are going to build together with Irena a global renewable hub at COP28 with a lot of bilateral meetings, events, etc. Our goal is to not only scale up the ambition, as I said at the beginning, but to pass from strategy to implementation, and we want to propose concrete action because there is no time to waste, and we need to move forward to be on track to net zero. And again, people need to take the leadership of this transition. Elisa, I pass the floor to you again for the rest of the webinar, please.
Thank you so much, Gianni, for those opening remarks. I'm now going to hand the floor over to Utse, who is the Deputy Director of the Knowledge Policy and Finance Center at Irena. So over to you.
Thanks, Elisa, and good afternoon from Abu Dhabi. I'm actually speaking to you from, well, hopefully the power for my laptop comes from our distributed solar on the top of our building here at Irena. I'll just give you the, as we always just talk acronyms, assuming everyone knows what it is, so International Renewable Energy Agency. And I'm very pleased that the Global Solar Council has invited us to give some opening remarks for the launch of this really important report. Now, as Gianni has already said, to have any chance of reaching the 1.5 degrees climate target, we need to massively scale up renewables, and in particular solar. So our World Energy Transitions Outlook, which we published a couple of months ago, suggests that by 2050, 50% of our power needs to come, more than 50% in fact, of power needs to come from solar. And there'll be a lot more demand for power as well, because of course we need to electrify end-use sectors like transport. But what does this mean? Currently, we're doing quite well on solar overall, around 191 gigawatts additional per year, but we need to triple that. The sooner the better. Now, of course, quite a lot of this will be achieved through large-scale solar grid-based, possibly done by utilities. And we haven't put a number on the decentralized solar of what needs to be done, but clearly it is a very important part of the equation. Gianni has already talked about the democracy, and clearly, we need to remember the energy transition needs to be about people, and distributed solar is a really good way of getting people on board and getting them interested. There are also, of course, all the issues. I mean, here in United Arab Emirates, we've got plenty of desert to put very large-scale solar. So things like rooftop or, solar in car parks, it's maybe not as an issue here in terms of habitat protection in nature, but it clearly is in many countries where space is at more of a premium. But the other thing I'd just like to raise as well, distributed solar is so important for energy access. Globally, we still got 675 million people without access to electricity. And in many countries, they have recently many of them have gained access through distributed solutions where, the grid can't reach, the grid is too expensive. So it is really very important. And then it's, of course, about jobs as well. So Irena has done plenty of work on jobs in the solar sector. And one of the really exciting things as well is that the solar sector is not as male-dominated as the energy sector overall. I mean, compared to wind, for example, we see twice as many women in the solar PV sector. 40% of the jobs are with women. And of course, the distributed solar sector is particularly good for creating local jobs and local value chains. So there are many really good aspects. But why is it not happening? And Gianni has said quite a few things already, and we'll hear more about it in a moment. But I've had that personal experience just this year, and it's unbelievably frustrating. I've put solar PV on my home in France, and when you look at the report, you see that France is one of the countries which, certainly in European terms, isn't doing particularly well in terms of how complex the whole system is. And I don't know how many forms I've had to fill in. And, 6 months after I've installed it, there is yet another form. And it almost seems never ending until, okay, the system's operating, but you need to want a way to access the payments from the utility, the government grant, and it really shouldn't be like that. So I look forward to hearing more from all the speakers on what some of the issues are and what can be done. But clearly here at Irena, we think distributed solar absolutely needs to expand, and it needs to expand quickly. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those words. And indeed, we're really excited to be working with Irena, with the Global Renewables Alliance on the road to COP28 to try to scale up that renewable ambition and triple global capacity by 2030. And distributed solar will play a big part of that. So thank you so much, Ute, for your remarks. And hopefully next time you put solar on your roof, it'll be a lot easier. So now I'd like to hand it off to my colleague, Francesco, who was the project manager and lead author on this report. And he will take us through the main takeaways from the report. So over to you, Francesco.
Thank you, Elisa. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to go over an overview of the report and the main takeaways. But first, a step back. If we go to the first slide, please, Lars. Here Gianni and Ute made a good job in making my life easier with the introduction. They went over many of the topics I was going to introduce. But the question is, why distributed solar PV? Why the Global Solar Council decided to begin focusing also on this side of the sector? And as it has been mentioned, across the renewables technology, solar PV truly is uniquely versatile, and this creates opportunity for distributed sector to really empower communities, individuals and companies around the world with huge socioeconomic benefits. And as it is summarized in the title of the report, it is a strategic action for climate and people. So these are just some of the benefits that we have communicated in the first part of the campaign. It's still accessible on the website. Gianni mentioned we reach out to people, and thanks to the members also in different languages to inform them about the main benefits. So first and foremost, it can lower energy bills of people worldwide, which is pretty important. We've seen it recently, and also very importantly, can stabilize their energy costs. So unlike fossil fuels, it doesn't fluctuate so much and so painfully. It is a huge driver for ensuring really energy security and broader access. So which is what is interesting to say about energy security. This also means resilience. So distributed solar PV creates resilience for consumers against market shocks, but also against extreme weather events, sadly. But we've seen many examples of distributed PV systems continue working during floods, storms, and other extreme weather events. So people, they can keep their lights on. And also, this is key to electrify rural areas. And we know that the vast majority of still many hundreds of millions of people living without access to electricity, they live in rural areas. And what is amazing is that while doing so and helping, as mentioned earlier, to achieve our climate targets, it needs to be more and more ambitious. It can help us do so while really impulsing local economies, which is very important. We've seen the problems of concentrated supply chain. So distributed solar PV has the potential of creating jobs. Some estimates, they talk about 16 million jobs by 2050, potentially only for the distributed sector alone. It can drive really the development of smart cities, exploiting the vertical and surface areas of our cities. And by doing so, it can support greatly the electrification of other sectors as well, just to name a few, mobility, heating and cooling, and so on. But the distributed sector solar PV faces unique and specific challenges that we believe needed the kind of analysis we've done. So analysis of the state of play of the authorization sectors around the world from an interregional and comparative viewpoint. So yes, please, let's go to the next slide, and let's dive right into the main takeaways really of this report. First, let me just mention we'll be able to involve 13 countries through the Global Solar Council members, national solar PV associations. I'm very happy to see a couple of them in the panel today. So first and foremost, we are seeing that this is not something small we're talking about, but really some multi-gigawatt markets are emerging for distributed solar PV, and they are spread. So we weren't able to see particular concentration at the geographical level, which was nice to see, but rather the capacity is distributed. And also, among these 13 countries, 5 of them already exhibit installed capacities of above 2 gigawatts. And also, let me mention eight countries. They told us distributed solar PV represents 10% of the total solar PV installed capacity in their country, and 5 countries they said this share goes up to at least 1/4. So, and we even say very young markets, relatively younger markets, that are really beginning development of their markets from the distributed sector. So this was quite interesting to see. But the bottom line is that really what we're talking about here is something that has potential to represent a big portion of the installed capacity that we need today and moving on. Let's move on to the next slide, please, Lars. Another main aspects of this analysis that although I just said some countries, for example, the share of distributed solar PV out of the total solar capacity is at least 1/4. We go even much higher. However, we see that there are still important gaps, which from one side is positive because this means we have still huge room to grow. What you see here is an estimation of the progress countries are making with regards to the full potential of rooftop capacity. But from the other side, this means that we're not really exploiting potential of these solutions. And so why these gaps? And if we move on to the next slide, we get an idea. So mainly, what we have been able to see is that this is due to barriers in the authorization processes. Gianni and Ude mentioned this. So mainly 2 points are really hindering the full speed deployment. And this is, we were able to see that this is quite spread around the world. So also the barriers are not really concentrated geographically, but these are problems that many markets are facing. So first, the uniformity of national authorization procedures. Needless to say, they should be uniform to go faster with the permitting and authorization. Whereas we've seen that almost in half the countries we have identified, we have analyzed, authorization procedures are still differentiated at the regional, at local level. What this means is even small differences in the authorization processes in different regions, in different cities, in different areas. They scare away consumers, investors, and they slow down the process quite a bit. Also because there are cases in which you have to deal with multiple entities, and this gets very, very long. Another interesting point is that within the authorization process, this as a trend. I mean, you see the graph on the right. Really, this was the same for every country we have analyzed. All of them, they identify the grid connection phase as the most difficult within the authorization process. What we took into account is both the complexity of the bureaucracy and the length that the process takes. So always grid connection difficulty is at least as difficult as permitting, but even more. Drawing on this, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. Part of the report is sort of an ideal model that the Global Solar Council have developed with involving some experts of the sector, and the report goes deep into the details. But what the bottom line is that these shouldn't take really more than 3 months. So we're talking about quite a swift and quick process, really, for rooftop system. And basically, what we have identified is that after consulting a database to understand if there is availability on the grid, and this is okayed, you should be able to begin installation right away. And the process up to the start of the connection work should take maximum 3 months. And this is above a certain threshold the countries can identify. And we've seen when we collected best practices that are in the report. Some countries are already doing so. Below a certain threshold, meaning for the smaller systems, really a simple communication to the authorization entity should be enough to begin constructing. And so grid connection is also guaranteed for this sort of projects. In some countries, this is really one of the recommendations that we set forth, and we can see them in the last slide. So the Global Solar Council and the analysis with setting forth some key recommendations specific to the sector. These are only some. There are many more in the report, but these are the key ones. So first and most importantly, permitting should be streamlined up to the hopefully the establishment of a one-stop shop. So this means all the authorization requirements are analyzed and dealt with by one entity in one place. This is much faster, and so consumers are also really incentivized on choosing this solution. Also, it is very important that countries, we've seen that not everyone has done so. Many still they didn't do it, but it's important to set specific targets and regulation accordingly for distributed solar PV in countries' transition strategies, because specific targets can drive the development of the market. Also, it is important, as I mentioned, to guarantee grid connection for the smaller, relatively smaller systems of rooftops. This can really boost, the residential, but also the commercial side of the sector. It is important also to introduce mandates to keep all new construction renovated buildings with rooftop PV. Likewise, we've seen example of this. This is a big asset in helping accelerating the development, and also this includes different kinds of construction. For example, also parking slots, the coverage of parking slots. This is quite helpful. Last on this slide, some key tools like net metering should be adopted and promoting to really exploit the full potential of self-consumption and drive the development of energy communities. Again, there are more in the report. I just want to mention one, which is to establish to include specific incentives for storage alongside net metering. This is key to really create prosumers and exploit the full potential of self-consumption. So this is the end of my overview, but let me just finish my intervention by thanking the Global Solar Council members that made all this possible. You can see them here. Thank you very much, and thank you to the Global Solar Council team. Looking forward to a great panel with such amazing speakers, and thank you for the attention. Elisa, back to you. I hope it was in the times.
Thank you so much, Francesco, for going over that. And if you have any questions about that presentation or in a panel discussion coming up now, feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar. With that being said, I'm going to hand it off now back to Gianni, who will introduce our amazing panel of experts that we have online today. So over to you, Gianni.
Thank you. I don't manage to activate my video. Maybe you can help me, Elisa, with the video. Elisa? Elisa, can you help me with the video, please?
Yes, just continue, Gianni, while we figure this out. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, okay, the video will come in a minute, but let me introduce one by one the panelists we have here. Let's start with Rodrigo Sawaya, which is the CEO of Abba Solar and chair-elect of GSC. I'd like anyway to have introduce yourself, Rodrigo, please, and really in a few seconds, a key message to start warming up this panel discussion.
Thank you, Gianni, Elisa, and greetings from Brazil, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm Rodrigo Sawaia, co-founder and CEO of AB Solar, which is the Brazilian Solar Photovoltaic Energy Association, representing the solar sector in Brazil. And I do believe that distributed generation will have a very important role in bringing forward the energy transition with more participation from the society. So this is the initial message I would bring forward, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. And we continue with Teci Capellan, Secretary General of Appia, the regional Asian Association. Teci, the floor is yours for introducing yourself, and in a few seconds, your message to start.
Thank you, Gianni, for inviting me in this launch of the distributed generation. I believe that the role of distributed generation will be critical. We have so many issues in promoting or in the installation of utility scale, and waiting is not an option. As we all know, the climate change is really developing fast, and therefore we need the installation of renewable energy in the hands of the consumer. They should be allowed and they should be given that role in producing their own energy, and the best way to do that is by installing solar on their roof. Thank you, Gianni.
Thank you very much, Teci, very inspiring. And now Paolo Rocco Viscontini, President of Italia Solare, which is the Italian Solar PV Association. Paolo, the floor is yours.
Hi, Gianni. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, Italia Solare is the major Italian association representing photovoltaic in all the value chain. And our mission, that is the mission of all the panelists here involved, is to give power to the distributed generation, because for its nature, usually what is distributed is weak in certain situations. So it's very important, our role, to aggregate so all the actors, all the players, stakeholders, to be stronger, to strengthen the target of PV at the end, that is basically distributed generation. So
thank you, Paolo. Indeed, aggregation is really a key word of also this debate. And now we have Eva Vandas, Group Head of Public Affairs of Amarenco, which is also a member. Eva, the floor is yours.
Sorry, Gianni, Eva's unable to make it. Unfortunately, she has COVID today.
Sorry for this. So we have Dean Cooper, Global Energy Lead of WWF. Dean, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Gianni. I should say that then I've been involved with renewable energy for over 30 years now. So I know that solar is certainly a foundation for the energy transformation that we need, moving from fossil fuels to renewables. But even solar has some impact on the broader natural environment. And I've only really discovered this since joining WWF. And the natural environment's in a critical state as well, with a loss of 70% over the past 50 years. So we all need to know how best to use solar and have some clear answers to those stakeholders who are trying to cast some doubt. And we believe WWF that decentralized solar can really make a significant contribution. And we can certainly build on this report from GSC just to secure this energy transformation that we all need, probably much quicker than we're all willing to admit. So thanks very much for the invite to be here.
Thank you very much, indeed. Indeed, we need association, organization as WWF, Greenpeace to disseminate our messages and also to engage people. And now, last but not least, Mehmet Bulut, Energy Analyst of Greenpeace.
Thank you, Gianni. Hi, everybody. I'd like to thank you, Gianni, and also the Global Solar Council for inviting me and for this very valuable work. So I'm an energy analyst at Greenpeace, and we think that decentralized solar energy can play a key role in the energy transition and we know that it improves the lives of communities, women and girls. It helps communities to thrive and supports businesses, particularly small businesses. So it's extremely important that it is used at much larger scale than we have today. So we're very happy. We'll be very happy to see that in the very near future, since the climate crisis is not waiting.
Thank you very much, Mehmet, and thank you for introducing this concept, this category of the small business, which is target also our report and debate today. So after this first round, I'd like you to energize with asking in a very free, dynamic way, anyway, your feedback on mainly 3 points anyway. First of all, you have seen from the report the huge potential of distributed PV, the great value that can bring to the energy transition, and indeed we need urgently to unlock all this potential. But from your point of view, first of all, do you think really that solar PV, distributed PV, can play a key role in the energy transition? And second, really how streamline the permitting one-stop shop, how can really easing the permitting we can really accelerate all these the dissemination of the UPV, and what let me say policymaker should do, prioritize in terms of mechanism in order to really accelerate. So I'd like to ask really your reaction on this key question. I see already there is one hands on, and then yes, the floor is yours, and then Rodrigo.
No, thanks very much, Jan. I just want to sort of come back on the first point, really, the role of decentralized or distributed solar. Basically, we know that wind and solar have a particularly critical role in this energy transformation for the world, for the global future. They're both better than hydropower. We obviously have concerns over hydro and the run-of-river concerns, better than bioenergy, thinking about the deforestation issues. Wind is good, but there's still impact on the natural environment, for example, the birds' routes, migration, etc. So solar may well be the best renewable energy in many locations. Uta mentioned earlier that we're expecting 50% of global energy needs to be met by solar by 2050. But, and this is the big but for solar for us, we must consider the land use issue, and particularly the impact on food production. And that's why we think distributed solar has such a significant role to play, to provide limited disruption to the natural environment, which is what we're looking for. So I think that's, for us, that's the sort of context that we need to put. Yes, wind and solar are good, but distributed solar needs to have particular attention, because that is going to cause the least damage to the natural environment as we move forwards. And nature is in crisis. It's not just climate change. We really do have a significant crisis as far as the natural environment is concerned as well. So that's just my lead in for that. Thanks.
Very good message, Dean. Indeed, on distributed PV, we can go fast. Anyway, there is the impact on nature landscape is even lower. Indeed, there will be other session where we can discuss, and I know that many of industry association also are trying to really work on the combination of agriculture and solar PV. But anyway, the topic of today is distributed PV and mainly rooftop. So very good. Anyway, we can really prioritize and go together, hands on hands on accelerating. Rodrigo.
Thank you, Gianni. Well, I would like to go a little bit more into details of some of the questions you posed to us during your introduction here of this discussion session. Specifically about the role of distributed generation, I would like to share an insight from the example of Brazil. For those of you who don't know Brazil, Brazil is the largest electricity market in Latin America by far. And it's also a country whose the second largest electricity source is already solar. 50% of the electricity that Brazil has in terms of installed capacity comes from solar power. And 2/3 of that, 70% of that, comes from distributed generation. So Brazil currently has an electricity grid with roughly 210 gigawatts in operation, and we have 33 gigawatts of solar, 23 gigawatts of that are distributed solar. So in our case, in Brazil's case, distributed generation is having a leading role on the development of solar on the ground. And one of the reasons that this was possible was because 10 years ago, actually in 2012, so 11 years ago, we have established a national net metering program that allowed consumers, gave consumers the right to connect their solar systems to the electricity grid so that they would be able to exchange the excess power they produced and offer this to their neighbors. This electricity will not run deep into the grid infrastructure. It will be consumed by the nearest neighbor locally, and therefore reducing grid use and reducing electricity loss in the grid as well, helping to bring more resiliency to the grid locally, and also helping to reduce the electricity costs of the consumers that invest in this technology. So I believe that the distributed generation solar revolution will be brought forward by people. And because of that, Gianni, I would say that one of the most important things that we have to do is talk to the population and bring awareness. So this is something that we are doing right now with this event, but also with the campaign that the Global Solar Council has developed throughout the following year, the last year, bringing more knowledge, information, consciousness, awareness about the power that solar power can bring to the society. And this is very important. We already see the benefits in Brazil of small businesses reducing the electricity bills and being able to improve their activities, to improve the quality of the services they provide to society, to create new jobs for the local population, thanks to this competitiveness that they gain from solar power. And this is not restricted to the urban environment. In our case, in Brazil, a significant share of distributed solar is in the rural areas. So this can also empower communities that are away from the urban centers, from the main consumption regions and areas, and help them stay in their areas instead of migrating to other areas of the country. So just as a starter, to say that I really believe on the power of distributed generation and how it is already helping Brazil in our electricity grid to diversify, to increase the share of renewables, and also to help the local population.
Thank you, Rodrigo. You actually anticipated already a question I had for you anyway. Really tell us how it's possible this new market so booming anyway on this PV, how what's your but yes, indeed, net metering and all the aspect you said, and also are the key words anyway, suggestion, recommendations for other countries. Indeed, thank you, Rodrigo. And now we have Mehmet that want to react from Greenpeace. Please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, actually, Rodrigo mentioned a few of the things that I also wanted to raise. And interestingly, I wrote my master's thesis about solar power and rural electrification in Brazil, in Minas Gerais, so it was a nice coincidence. Yeah, it is clear that distributed solar power can definitely improve the lives of people, not only in rural areas, but also in urban areas. And we think that it is extremely important that governments also develop policies that help people break the vicious cycle of energy poverty by developing policy tools to, install solar power, reduce their energy costs, so they can have more resources for other things. And this is extremely important. Also, in terms of a system level energy efficiency, making our grids more resilient, it's safer to have a more distributed system than the one that we have today. So it is extremely important to use decentralized solar power to finally move into this centralized system to a more decentralized energy system that will be more efficient. Thank you.
Thank you, Mehmet, to target also to bring to the attention the reduction of poverty that distributed PV can bring, and moreover. There's Paolo, also back to you because Italy in our survey has been the country with the biggest share, at least, of distributed PV. We are going to implement further our report next year, but Italy has indeed a huge share anyway in the total capacity of distributed PV. Anyway, how the distributed PV has managed to engage and bring benefit to the people and the communities. Anyway, do you have any best practices anyway from Italy to bring to other countries, Paolo?
Yes, thank you for the question, Gianni. I start just with some number, and then we go to the answer to the exact answer to the question. But I think it's interesting. In Italy, we have overall PV installations are 27.3 gigawatt end of first semester of this year, and of this total, it's about 6 gigawatt are residential. So in terms of power, the 22% of the total power for 6 gigawatt is residential. If we talk about roofs, we consider residential between 1 and 12 kilowatt. That is the power that we the measure that is coming to us from the public institutions. But if we add the power between 12 kilowatt and 200 kilowatts, so adding also the small scale of C&I and bigger residential, we reach a total of 47% of 27 gigawatt that is coming from roofs practically. So just to remind better, about the half of the total power of what is installed in Italy is coming from roofs. In terms of number, the same power is in 99% of number of systems. So we have almost 1.5 million solar plants. The 99% of these plants are on the roofs, and they are providing the 50% of the power, so more or less also of the energy we guess. But this gives us some important indications, in my opinion. Well, one is that we have not to underestimate the importance of the land to be very effective in the decarbonization through solar. The lands are really allowing to speed up the process. And if I can say, my opinion is that is, at least considering the situation in Italy, is not a fight between solar and food. We can integrate both, and we have also to consider that the worst damages to the environment are given by the agriculture, actually. So some of the best areas for the biodiversity is the areas with solar systems, because there are laws in Italy not allowing any kind of pollution or fertilizers in these areas. So we have to govern, we have to manage properly. And regarding your question, well, I think that the first effect of such a big number of growing number, because there is still a lot of space to occupy with solar. But if we talk about solar on residential roofs, that is becoming more and more common. This is giving a fundamental contribution to the, I call, solar awareness. So it's not something far, but it's very important to contribute to the general mind, the general feeling of the people that solar can really be effective to our life, reducing the bills, first of all. And the last point is that in Italy, as best practice, we can, I think we can mention something that Italia Solare actually created as idea, promoted from a legislation point of view, and became a law. It's called the solar belt. It means to make plants up to 1 megawatt in the areas around the towns, usually close to the industrial areas. So this is a good way to enlarge the roof of the industrial buildings that quite often is not absolutely enough to give a substantial contribution to the energy need of the factory. So one can easily install a plant of up to 1 megawatt just in the area of 500 meters of distance from the limit, from the border of the industrial area. And even if this is an agricultural land, because the space, believe me, in Italy, we made all the calculation, all the estimation is not an issue. And this plant can give a good contribution to the factories, to the industrial areas, but can be also part of energy community to increase the solar contribution also to hundreds or thousands eventually, if we make more plants of single homes. So it's helping people to know that that plant is contributing to our bill. Also to the people who cannot have a solar plant on the roof because maybe it's a condominium. We have to think also to this. So we can do it with an approach through energy communities, but not only roofs, also lands just close to the industrial areas that usually are not so pressured, also from the agricultural point of view.
Thank
and
you
then
very much,
both can work, can also coexist.
Yes, to take away anyway from many messages you gave to us, indeed people start to touch anyway solar panels and to see the results in their house and understanding the value. And indeed, anyway, we need to consider the sun belt, which is not the area of the world with more sun, but is around the town. There are many examples also in Italy, but also in Germany, where the towns start to be self-sufficient, and then we need to consider the land. After maybe Dean has some comments on that, but I'd like to go to Teci Capellan, Secretary General of Appia. I'd like to repeat. And Teci, and indeed your area, your region has the most high installer capacity of the world, and of course differentiate in many regions. Anyway, how can you tell us how much this UPV anyway count in this in your region, and how if there is some takeaway from some country specific in your region that you would like to highlight, Teci? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gianni. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Hello?
Yes, very well. Very well.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Please go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Gani. Just for those who are in this meeting, the APPIA is the not-for-profit association that concentrates on Asia, particularly the Southeast Asian region. And the residential rooftop solar is really, in our experience, a pathway to cleaner energy. When the region was starting to introduce solar in a big way in the utility scale sector, and there was a lot of resistance, the residential solar provided the popular support that convinced policymakers and politicians to develop the environment for solar. The direct experience of consumers in terms of the economics of this technology has provided a strong basis to convince and influence politicians and policymakers to go solar. So our experience in rooftop solar in paving the way towards large-scale installation of solar was very favorable and positive. And this is something that we are now introducing in other parts of Southeast Asia, particularly in Cambodia, in Myanmar, also in Laos. These are countries that have a very strong agriculture sector, and the urbanization is still slow. This will help introduce and accelerate the deployment of rooftop solar. That's the first one. Second is that in land-scarce countries such as Malaysia, such as the Philippines, or even in Indonesia, although it's a big country and a big population, land is scarce, and and agriculture and food production are very critical segment of the economy. So it is important that the rooftop solar provides that pathway in the interim so that our decarbonization goals can still be achieved through the installation of solar on the roof. Distributed generation will be an answer to countries that have very small land or narrow landscape that is very important in utility scale solar. So our experience in these countries such as Malaysia, Philippines, and Indonesia have been very positive insofar as solar rooftop or distributed generation is concerned. The third is that the grid infrastructure in most of Southeast Asian countries are not that well developed. So it takes a very big investments for utility scale solar to accelerate in a way, in a number that we want to, unlike distributed solar or distributed generation through rooftop solar, we are able to scale up solar energy into different communities and neighborhood. Insofar as the obstacles, the net metering scheme is very limited in the region. There are only 3 countries that have adopted net metering: the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Thailand has not introduced net metering, neither did Vietnam. But our experience in net metering is very positive because it gives incentive to households to put up solar on the roof because of the credits and the savings that it provides. So there are a lot of obstacles to net metering, and I think Francesco mentioned those. The permitting. Permits first in the installation. There are so many agencies that you have to go through before you can get a connection. That is only the technical side. In getting the incentives, you go through another set of permits. So I would support the suggestion of Francesco in the report that there has to be one-stop solution so that the permitting is
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teti. Very good message. And indeed, when there is a small space, anyway, indeed, the roof are the only way to go. There is unfortunately not so much time for further debate, but we just did warm up a debate that will continue with all of you, and thanks for the cooperation to all the associations and also the NGOs present here for the campaign. And back to Elisa for the final words and close of the webinar. Elisa, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you to all of our speakers. This is just scratching the surface of all our analysis and recommendations we've included in the report. And we'll be displaying shortly. Yeah, there it is, the QR code. So if you scan that QR code, you'll be directed to the Global Cellular Council website, where you can download the full report to learn more about our analysis and recommendations. And watch this space for the next edition of this report, which will add new countries and analysis at COP28. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Wish you all a great day. And I'm happy to work with all of these amazing colleagues to catalyze the solar revolution across the world. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.